Last week, the remains of 215 Indigenous children killed in a residential school in British Columbia, Canada, were found, with thousands more still unaccounted for. Over 150,000 Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their homes and placed in these residential schools in an attempt to erase their culture, families, and way of life. Canada is not unique. There's a similar colonial history that's happened in the United States and across the world, which has meant the genocide and erasure of Indigenous cultures and peoples. Indigenous people continue to feel this undescribable trauma. I invite you to join me in a land acknowledgement. Wherever you find yourself right now, I encourage you to think about the land that you are on and send an acknowledgement and gratitude for this land to the original carers and stewards. I acknowledge that I'm a white settler living on stolen land, which is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. We are reminded that the land on which we live and work is steeped in rich Indigenous history and is home to many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people today. As a settler, I am owning and sitting with the discomfort of our country, of Canada's actions. I acknowledge that I'm benefiting from colonialism, and there is a responsibility that sits with me. We all have a part to play in truth and reconciliation. Thank you for joining me in this acknowledgement. As families, self-advocates, caregivers, and supporters who are connected to and allied with the disability community, we should be able to have a great deal of compassion for people in the Indigenous community. People with disabilities have also experienced being removed from their homes and placed in institutions where they were treated as less than human. From 1867 to 2009, over 50,000 people with disabilities were institutionalized in Ontario alone. And as of 2017, there were still over 900 people living in operational institutions in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. This is living trauma experienced by people with disabilities and their families. On a podcast, I had the opportunity to speak with Joe Clayton, an Indigenous man who is a survivor of the Rideau Regional Centre, an institution that was operational in Smith Falls, Ontario. In this podcast, Joe shared his horrific injustices that were done to him while being institutionalized. He also shares how he was able to become the man he is today as a photographer and an artist. And I invite you to listen to this conversation with Joe, and I've included a link below this video. We need to do better, right? We can do better by taking action. Each and every one of us. As a settler, you might be asking, how? How can I take action? I invite you to join me in taking the recommended actions on the website oncanadaproject.ca/settlers take action. There's 4 recommended action. The first action is to find out whose traditional territory you live on. The second is to learn more about the original caretakers of the land that you inhabit, the history and current issues that affect those communities. The third step is to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's 94 calls to action. The fourth step is to email your government official. If you're in Canada, your MP, if you're elsewhere in the world, your local officials, and tell them you care about Indigenous peoples and you want to see action taken. The links are available below this video to help you take action and to seek truth and reconciliation in your community with Indigenous peoples. I'm Eric Gall. Together, let's take a step forward.